One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's Bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So I'm sure by now you have heard about the Apple Podcast updates. Maybe this is brand new news to you. That's really hard to say. Brand new news to you, but there are some changes coming, and I want to dive into those today and talk about what you need to know as a listener of podcasts, but also a creator of podcasts. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so like I said, we have had kind of like an industry like, ooh, what's going on? What's happening in podcasting? And it's been an exciting last few days. I'm actually recording this right after the Apple News information kind of happened a few days ago. And I still have more questions than answers, but I didn't want to sit on the information that I have and the resources that I'm using to understand this information. And I wanted to go ahead and tell you why I think this information is important personally to me, but also to you, like for you to think about as a creator. So I want to go back to last year when Spotify, they released that things were going to start being exclusive on their platform, and like all these other updates of, special shows that were only going to be available on Spotify. Personally, I wasn't really that disrupted by any of that because I don't listen to podcasts on Spotify. Like, that's not my app of choice. I've never really been a Spotify consumer or a user. And if I look at my stats, a very, very small percentage of people that listen to this podcast and my daily podcast listen on Spotify. So I haven't been like keeping up with all the updates and everything that's happening simply because it hasn't related to this particular audience, because y'all listen. There's 70% of y'all that listen on Apple Podcast. So the Spotify news could probably be relevant for some of you, but not everybody. So that's why I am looking at Apple Podcast very differently and the news that they're releasing, because I know that most of y'all use Apple Podcast or possibly one of the other players that they call them, like it's like a catcher. Like they catch all of their podcast information from Apple Podcast. So if you listen on Good Pods or one of those other players, they are pulling directly from Apple Podcast to get their information and to air their shows. So that's kind of like my disclaimer for all the information and why I'm making it such a big deal, because in my opinion, it is a big deal. It is a really big deal because it affects a good chunk of this audience. But also I think that as podcasters, we need to understand what's happening in the marketplace so we can make the best decision for us and for our audience. So with all that being said, if you do have an audience, like you sign into Buzzsprout and you see that 80% of your people are coming from Spotify, then maybe the information that I'm sharing here with you today won't affect you that much. I don't know. Like it's really like there's a lot of theory, speculation, and assumptions that are going into today's episode. Now, don't get me wrong. I have lots of facts and figures right here in front of me, but I just want to make sure that you know that the information I'm sharing here with you today is information that I am thinking about as a consumer of podcast, but also a creator of podcast, and kind of the different hats that we have to wear, and also think about our audience. Okay, I know that was a huge, huge intro, but it's really a lot of the things that I've been thinking about over the last few days. So if you're part of our weekly email, then you saw what I put out this last week. I linked to a Buzzcast episode. I'm going to link to it in the show notes. So don't worry. It is crystalprofit.com/episode 249. That's where you're going to find all the news articles, everything that we're talking about today, the Buzzcast episode. This is a podcast by the people over at Buzzsprout, and they do a fantastic job in breaking down what happened, why it happened, and kind of helping you understand, like navigate the waters of this. But I'm giving you more of a high level. This is what I believe your questions are and what you need to know as a creator and a consumer of podcasts. But I will absolutely link to that episode in the show notes because it was so good. It was so good. It was about an hour, so be prepared. Like, get your walking shoes on, or go do something that's going to be like, okay, I need to hear this information, but I can also kind of multitask or do something else while I'm listening to it. So, okay, there we go. There's all the disclaimers. All the information is out there. The first thing that I want to talk about is the Apple Podcast for Creators page. I'm actually looking at it while we're going through this so we can talk about it. I'm also going to link to the original article that came out that Apple released. It's like called the Apple Newsroom, and that's where these like one-off articles are coming from. Like, I'm getting all this straight from Apple, right? I'm not like, oh, so-and-so said this, and this is who said this other news outlet. And like, no, I'm getting it straight from Apple in their press release that they released on April 20th, 2021. Okay, so if you're listening to this in the future, like this just happened a few days ago, but it's important to kind of know, like, have some context for when we're talking about these updates coming up and what they're going to look like. So when you're on the newsroom article, I clicked on the Apple Podcast for Creators website because this is what y'all are. Like, y'all are creators or potential creators of podcasts. So you're going to want to know what is actually happening. So what's really cool, I'm going to give you some pros and cons throughout this today. But what I already like is that Apple is dedicating resources for creators. Previously, this was not the case. There was not a whole bunch of information out there around how to support yourself as a podcaster or really be successful as a podcaster. And I think that, enough people they've listened, I guess, to their audience, or they've seen other companies that have done other things that they're like, oh, maybe we should do that too. So this platform is really cool. Like, I'm already liking the features of it. But if you are looking or you're thinking about doing the Apple Podcast for Creators program, highly recommend going here to check it out because it's going to tell you what it is, what it means, and all the things. So first and foremost, I'm scrolling down and I'm looking at like, well, what is this? What does this even mean, right? Like, do I have to be on Apple Podcasts for Creators? Can I not just do my show like I've previously done, especially for those of you that already have a podcast, right? If you are a Buzzsprout customer, you use another hosting site, you're asking, do I still need them? Like, how does this actually work? And from my perspective and what I'm doing, I don't like the idea of having all of my content in one place forever and ever. Amen. Like, that makes me a little nervous, makes me a little uncomfortable. And that's actually something I've always enjoyed about having a podcast, is knowing that it's being distributed to all these different places and that anyone with a device can figure out how to listen to a podcast on their phone, on their, whatever they're using to listen to podcasts. So with that being said, I personally am not just going all in on Apple Podcast and going to switch everything over and that's all I'm going to do. But you can do that if you want to. If you want to just have all of your stuff exclusively on Apple, you could do that. You could create an episode, upload it to Apple Podcasts Connect, and you can submit your show and have it only on Apple. The thing that I don't like about this is that you are cutting off a large potential audience, because even though I have the majority of my audience listening on Apple Podcast, there's still other people out there listening on different players, and maybe that is the only one that's offered. Like, I know when I was listening to the Buzzcast episode, they were talking about how, if this is only on iOS, then a good chunk of the world doesn't have Apple. There's a lot of Android users, and you're cutting off, it's kind of like you're cutting off a limb, like you're severing a limb of the market, because if you're exclusive to Apple, you're just cutting off these other potential people that could listen to your show. And I don't like that. I don't like that idea at all. But what I do like is it gives you the ability. We've had a few different membership features that we've talked about here on the show. We had Glow.fm. We had Amira. She came on and talked about having a podcast membership site and what that looks like. I talked about Hello Audio recently. So there are absolutely platforms out here or out in the world that can give you the subscription model of, I want to have my podcast behind a paywall and have people pay me every month to listen to this exclusive content. That stuff's already out there, but it's a different platform. What I like about Apple Podcast and being able to subscribe, and we're going to talk about that in a second, is you don't have to deal with the messy middle part of transactions. What would happen is if someone subscribes to your podcast, you get a cut of the money. You don't get 100%, because Apple it's kind of like you're paying them to be your bookkeeper, to be your accountant. They're actually handling the processing fees and they're doing all the other stuff on the back end. So they're going to take 30% of the 100% that you're charging, right? So I don't even want to do math. I'm bad. Hang on, let me get out my calculator. Let me pull up my calculator here. Like I said, I'm at my desk, I'm at my computer. So let's pretend that you had a $5 monthly access fee to a certain content that you want to put behind a paywall for Apple Podcasts. This doesn't have to be your main podcast. This is just podcast content that you want to put out there that is exclusive, that people can only get as a member of your podcast who is subscribed. So let's say it's $5 a month. Then if Apple were to take a cut of that, that is $1.50 that Apple would get as a transaction fee for people subscribing to your show. Does that make sense? I hope that this is making sense. And I hope that I'm describing this in a way that is easy for you to understand. But basically, I feel like Apple has cut off like certain areas of the market that I don't know that we're still going to have membership sites if everyone switches to Apple Podcast and I can just handle all my transactions right through Apple and it's just done that way. And I don't have to deal like that. That sounds appealing to me. But let's go back to the subscriptions. So the vernacular with podcasting is changing. And that means that you will no longer see a subscribe button when these features start rolling out. And what that means is it's going to say follow. So, right, like you follow someone on Instagram, you follow, someone somewhere else, wherever you follow people on Facebook, whatever, you follow people. So that is what people are used to seeing when it comes to social media. Subscribing is a term that Apple, they did all this research and they said that people feel that the term subscribe means you are paying. So the difference is you just watching cable TV versus subscribing to Netflix and paying them on a monthly basis to watch their content.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Starting a podcast can be super overwhelming. How do I know? Well, because I've been there. I have been in your shoes. If you are just now in the creation stage of getting your podcast up and running, then I invite you to check out Profit Podcasting. This is my digital program that teaches you all the ins and outs of how to start, launch, and market your podcast. I want you to go check it out and see if it's going to be the right fit for you. If you're looking for a way to understand exactly how podcasting works, you want to know how to create content, how to launch your podcast, how to get it on all the players, but most importantly, how to tell people about it without feeling like you're alienating your friends, your family, your neighbor. I want you to go check out Profit Podcasting. So go to crystalprofit.com/course to learn more about Profit Podcasting and to enroll today. crystalprofit.com/course to check out more. Okay, let's get back to today's episode. So it's going to be the same for podcast, where you can follow podcast and listen to free content, or someone could subscribe to your show, pay that $5 monthly fee to listen to your podcast, and that content is exclusive to people that are paying for it. I like this. I also don't like this, and I think it's still confusing. So I am going to have so much more content coming out in the future when we see these updates actually roll out. But I just wanted to get your brain thinking about, how can I use this? Do I want to just have free content? Do I want to just have paid content? And what does it look like if I decide to not opt into the Apple Podcast Creators Program? What does that look like? Am I going to be penalized by not listening to this? Like what's actually going to happen? So in order to opt in, if that's something that you choose to do, I'm going to go back to this newsroom article again, because they have like kind of the terms and conditions of what's going to happen. And it's under pricing and availability. So if you go to the link in the show notes, you hop down to pricing and availability, it says it's going to be available for over 170 countries and regions starting in May. And you're going to have Apple Podcast subscriptions and channels. And channels is another thing we haven't really touched on, because that's something that I feel like in theory could be kind of cool. But I don't understand how we could use it just yet as podcasters and creators, because most of us are creating our own shows, right? Like you're not collaborating with other people. You may have people guesting on your shows, but you're not saying, hey, so-and-so, let's promote our shows together. We're all going to join this channel. And then we're going to say, hey, this is everything you need to know about running an online business, or this is everything you need to know about interior design. This is, the channel to go to for people who want to know about email marketing. I don't really know what it's going to look like. I really don't. I'm kind of fascinated, and my brain is going wild on all the ways that we could use it, but all of that is theoretical because I haven't done it, right? This is why I've been kind of tiptoeing around what I was going to share and not share, because so much of it is theory. It is theory. These updates haven't even happened. They haven't even rolled out. All we have are the few website articles from Apple and like some pictures of shiny statistics that are like, oh, this is going to work. It's going to change the face of podcasting. But we don't know. We don't really know what all this is going to look like. But let's keep going on. So it says pricing. So pricing for each subscription is set by the creators, like we were talking about. If you want to do it, $5 a month, and billed monthly by default. So creators can additionally offer annual billing, which subscribers can manage from their Apple ID account. So everything, again, is handled directly in Apple. I love this because it takes out you having to chase down customers who didn't pay. It's like, oh, your credit card failed. Like, you don't have to deal with any of that. You don't have to deal with any of that. Like, as far as I know, again, going back to the speculation, it sounds like all of that will be handled on their end. And if someone doesn't pay, then they don't get access to your information anymore. Again, speculation and me assuming things from reading the information here. Then they go on to talk about through family sharing, up to 6 family members can share a subscription. So here in our family, in the Profit household, like we are Apple device people. We have iPads, we have iPhones, and we have an Apple TV. And my husband, I want to say it was his last Christmas, he bought into Apple Arcade. I'd never heard of this, and I don't really play video games. Like I play them with the kids like from time to time, but he like just got super obsessed with like understanding like how the arcade stuff works. So we have family sharing with Apple Music and Apple Arcade. So we can download these games or buy these games, and then we can all share them across our devices for up to 6 people. So it would be the same concept with podcasts. So if I purchased a podcast, or I subscribe to a podcast, it sounds like I can share it with my husband. Like I could say, hey, we're going to subscribe to this incredible comedian podcast, and like we can both listen to it. So we're not both paying $5. We're each paying $5. Oh, no, sorry. I said that wrong. We're only paying $5 for our family, and then we can share that subscription. Much like with Netflix, you have, your profiles and your different logins, but you're not paying for each one of those. Are we on the same page? I hope that you're nodding along and you're saying, yes, we get this, Crystal. Keep going. I'm going to keep going, assuming that you don't have any questions about this. But again, I'm going to link to all of this in the show notes for you to look at it and research on your own. crystalprofit.com/episode 249. That's where you're going to find all this information. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Listeners will be able to access the enhanced search tab with top charts and categories, new show and episode pages with the Smart Play button. Okay, I'm going to pause real fast because The smart play button was something that they talked about in the Buzzcast episode. And from my understanding, they were making it easier for people like listeners to navigate your show, whether you have series, right? Like if you have seasons of like, okay, this is season 1, this is season 5, and people like, you don't want them jumping into the middle of a season. It's almost like, and I'm going to use the example of Bridgerton because I love the show, right? It's on Netflix. But it's almost like you hopped into the middle of a Bridgerton episode and you're like, wait, who's Lady Whistledown? I don't know who that is. If you haven't seen the show, you have to go watch it. It's so, so good. It's so good. I love Shonda Rhimes and everything that she does. Oh my gosh, y'all. Did y'all hear that? It just lightning and thundered so loud. I know you can't hear lightning. It thundered so loud here and it scared the bejesus out of me. Well, we're going to keep going. We're going to make it through this. I have to finish talking about this because I'm on fire right now. And if I stop, then it's just, we're going to lose the energy. We've got the momentum. We're going to keep going. But yeah, that shook me up a little bit. So back to the smart play button. If you were to start in the middle of an episode, not a middle of an episode, but a middle of a series, it's going to help you navigate like, hey, by the way, start this at the first of the season because you're right in the middle of something. So I'm still trying to understand that better. Again, go listen to the Buzzcast episode where they talked about it. But now let's jump down to the Apple Podcasters program. They say this includes all the tools needed to offer premium subscriptions on Apple Podcast. It's available to creators in over 170 countries and regions for $19.99 US dollars per year. So for $20 a year, you can enroll in the Apple Podcasters Creators Program. This is done through Apple Podcasts Connect, and it sounds like you'll just be able to go in and, you know, your credit card's already connected to your Apple account. If you have the app, like Apple iOS and you're like integrated with all that, it sounds like your card will just be charged. I will say I went in to create my Apple Podcasts Connect account the day that this was all released, and I still have, like, as of me recording this, I still have, like, it's going to take a few hours. And I'm like, okay, it's been 2 days and nothing's happened. So from the recommendation on Buzzcast, they were like, don't connect yet. Don't connect yet. Like, let them figure out the bugs. Let them figure out what's going on. And then you can connect later and all the things. So per the Buzzcast, like let's give it a few more days and let them, Apple, figure out what's going on behind the scenes. Let them deal with the influx of people who are trying to get connected to the Apple Podcast Connect. You're not missing out on anything because nothing has been rolled out. Nothing rolls out until May. Okay, and then the last thing that I wanted to talk about today is, again, the show notes for today's episode is crystalprofit.com/episode 249. And that's where I'm going to link to everything. But I wanted to talk about, from a consumer standpoint, what I'm going to do. So I look at all the content that I've consumed over the last, when did I start listening? I would say in 2014, 2015 is when I really started listening to podcasts. And of all of those, I can tell you I am a client, or I am a consumer on some level, or I have purchased products, books, events from people that I've listened to on podcast. So I have actually bought in to what they were creating on this free platform in some form or fashion, in very, very different ways, whether it was a movie that I went and saw of a comedian that I loved, or it was, an event that I went to, a book, a program that I bought. There's so many different ways that podcasters have touched my life personally. And I love the idea of being able to give back to content creators. I think that it's really cool. But I also don't know that I would shell out a ton of money to listen to someone who's brand new and just coming on the scene, even if they are like a hot shot, they're an expert in their topic and they know all their things. I just don't know that it's going to be easy for someone who is unknown or lesser known to start a subscription model podcast right out of the gate and be very successful. So I say that with like all the love in my heart to someone that's brand new and they're like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my podcast behind a paywall and I'm going to charge $10 a month. And like, I'm just going to have people flocking to my podcast. I don't think that's a great strategy. I really don't. And while I love the idea of podcasters being able to monetize, podcasters being able to, make money from the content that they're creating, like that part excites me. But y'all, I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing this for 3 years already. So I have grown a following of loyal listeners. I have grown my podcast from 5 people, probably people I was related to, that listened in the beginning, to now I have a few hundred listeners. And I don't want to give you the thought that, oh, well, I can just put it behind a paywall, I can charge for it, and people are just going to come in droves to listen to my show. That's not what happened for me. So just because now you can charge for it, I don't want you to get the impression that that is automatically the best idea for a brand new podcaster. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe things will change in 6 months. Maybe things will be totally different when everything releases and there's brand new things that like we had no idea, like the features and the capabilities and all the fun things that were coming with it. But I just wanted to give you my honest opinion for those of you that are just now starting. Because I talk to y'all all the time. You are in our Facebook group. You email me. You send me direct messages on Instagram. And you put stuff in the comments all the time on YouTube. I am constantly interacting with people in this community, and I know there are a lot of people that have not launched your podcast. So while this seems like a really cool, shiny object, a way to make money from the get-go, I want you to kind of be cautious about your strategy of how you're going to use these new features of Apple Podcasts, because I don't want you cutting yourself off before you ever even get started. And I remember hearing Dave Jackson. He is one of the very first people to take on kind of an education role in podcasting. I met him at Spark, the Spark Christian Podcast Conference in 2020. And I remember hearing him talk about podcasting. He was talking about podcast monetization on stage. And he was talking about, it's funny how you listen to all these people who immediately want to start making money with their podcast, but they haven't even really started. And he was saying when we started podcasting, him and the other, like they call them like the godfathers of podcasting, basically, they were saying, we weren't in it to make money. We were in it to share our message, and it was a lot of fun for us. And we truly enjoyed, like, you didn't have to pay us anything. We were just having fun talking about what we were excited about. So I say that to remind you that it's not all about making money and monetizing your podcast. If it is, you're going to be very frustrated when that doesn't happen from the get-go. Because I can tell you right now, I've been doing this for 3 years. You don't see me with fancy sponsorships. You don't see me with tons of ads on this podcast. It's because I haven't gotten to the level of having tons of fancy sponsorships and Geico and State Farm and all these big players like coming and banging down my door, because I don't have that kind of clout. I don't have that kind of growth on this podcast. It's slow and steady. And trust me, it is like eons higher than what it was in the past when it comes to listeners and downloads and how many people are tuning in every week. But I just want to be very frank with you and tell you that it is a long game. And I hope that you're encouraged to go on this journey. And I hope that you go on this journey with me and that you're interested in learning more about podcasting. If you want to know more about podcasting, I encourage you to check out, we have a course about it. If you didn't know that, we have a digital course that will teach you everything you need to know, from how to start a podcast, how to launch it, how to market it, how to do all the things that you need to know to get your podcast up and running in 30 days. I want you to go check it out. We're going to have a link in the show notes, but my course, Profit Podcasting, is something that can absolutely help you get your podcast up off the ground so you can start thinking about ways that you can use these new updates. You can start thinking about, how am I going to position myself now that there's more people? Like, the spotlight is on. It's on podcasts. And I feel the heat. Like, I feel the, like, not the pressure, but like, I feel that everyone's eyes are turning to podcasts right now. And I'd love to see you jump in the game, because the people that jump in now and figure out how to use audio to their advantage, y'all, there's stuff coming out with Facebook in the future with audio features. And I mean, I don't even know what all that looks like. I heard that in the Buzzcast episode, so go listen to that. They have a more insight on what's going on there. But I just think, y'all, it's about to blow up. Like, we thought podcasting was getting bigger. It is about to blow up, and I am here for the ride. If you want to go on this journey with me, I encourage you to check out more about Profit Podcasting and look into it. I think that it would be a great solution if you need something to kick your butt into gear and get off the fence of, I think I'm going to start a podcast, maybe, maybe not. We'd love to have you in the program, because we have some freaking go-getters, some people that hit the ground running, get their podcast up and going Amy got hers up and running in 3 weeks, and it was so impressive, so incredible. And I know that she's having a blast with her show. So that's all I have for y'all today. I hope that your heads aren't totally spinning off the rails with everything we shared today, but go to crystalprofit.com/episode 249 for all the links, all the things, all the information that you want. I'm going to link to a YouTube video that I did last week, and I'm going to be putting out some more YouTube videos and resources for you to check out to see how all this unfolds. I'm excited, and I hope that you are too. I hope that you're encouraged with podcasting, and if you are feeling a little discouraged, then reach out. Don't sit there and just be like, oh, I don't understand this, I'm overwhelmed. Please reach out to me. Send me a DM on Instagram. Reach out in our Facebook group. But again, go to crystalprofit.com/episode 249. And if this is your first time tuning in, y'all, I say this all the time, but what an episode to be listening in and just hearing some realness, y'all. I hope that you appreciate the honesty that I share here. I'm always going to be honest with you and tell you what I'm actually doing on my end to help podcasters, but also what I'm doing as a podcast consumer. So go check out the show notes for today. Subscribe to the show. I'm still going to say subscribe because follow just sounds weird. It'll take time. It'll take time to do that, but we're going to say subscribe for now, even though you're not paying for this. And check out the show notes. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.